Okay, so today we are going to talk about how we evaluate user interfaces uh, with the help of prototypes, of course, and uh, also after the actual application is completely built, how we can also evaluate in terms of its usability. So when we say evaluating user interfaces, we actually mean the usability. In terms of usability, in terms of usability goals, how we evaluate user interfaces, we are going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about some quantitative evaluation techniques in which users are involved, and also some qualitative evaluation techniques like questionnaires, surveys. So these slides contain some guidelines, tips on how to prepare good questionnaires, good surveys, how you should first design a pilot study before actually uh, making a large scale study. And what kind of tools we have to do quantitative analysis. So we are going to talk about these things that we should consider, take into account when evaluating user interfaces. And this evening's quiz is also going to start at 8 p.m. If you log in Oticlas, you'll see there's a quiz 2 activity in this corresponding week, on the week of April 12th until 17th. So if you scroll down, you'll see quiz 2, which is going to be available at 8 p.m. sharp, and it's going to be available for 10 minutes as usual, as the last week. And it's going to be about this reading assignment we have for this week, which was a study on the manipulation of 2D objects in a projector camera-based augmented reality environment. And this was using try to build an augmented reality uh, office space where gesture recognition is also gestures for object manipulation is des- designed for this center, for this application. So um, this also shows you how you can build prototypes even if the technology is not exactly available to you at that point. Like you may not be a computer vision expert, but you can still design a prototype, and you can evaluate not the functionality, the technical capability of the system, but which gestures are suitable for manipulating certain types of objects in certain types of settings. All right, so this was a nice example on how you can also use this kind of prototyping in your projects, even if you don't actually implement those difficult, technically difficult issues. All right, so this is going to be this week's reading. For next week, actually, next week is 23rd of April, but I'm still going to have a class on April 23rd. We're going to have a short, our topic, in order to not be behind schedule, we're going to have class next week in the same time at 7 p.m. April 13th. But the topic we are going to talk about is these design paradigms, design rules are very simple guidelines that we're going to go over quickly, probably. And also, I'm not going to go over these. I'll just give the lecture slides for you to read the process of interaction design, because it's this one. Uh, Again, I'm going to go quickly over maybe both slide sets. I will just spend 1 hour next week. And also for next week's reading assignment, I plan to give a full day for you to submit your quiz answers. All right, so the reading assignment for next week is also like a magazine article. It's about it's about an evaluation of a multi-purpose interactive public display in Finland, and they have nice findings about how they evaluated in its context. So it's in the wild, multi-purpose interactive public displays in the wild 3 years later. So this is like an update of some original paper maybe, but they report their findings on evaluation. So it's relevant to what we are going to discuss today, how they evaluate these interfaces, especially this part where it talks about the laboratory versus the real world. So this is really important. And at the end, they have a main point that they indicate here. I think it was somewhere here. Anyway, yeah, actually, yeah, no. So yeah, here, if you read this, this is an easy read with lots of figures, lots of photos about how the public display was used. So I think it's going to be a fun read. It's not a very long paper. The last page is just authors' biographies. So it's just, and the seventh page is half references. So it's like 6.5 page magazine article type of reading. But as I said, let me repeat, since next week is a national holiday, I will still conduct a short lecture to cover the material that we're supposed to cover that week. But I will make the quiz available for a whole day, starting at Friday 8 p.m. and going all the way to Saturday 8 p.m. All right, so you will have a chance to work on the reading assignment on Saturday too, if you want to do that until 8 p.m. Saturday evening. Okay, so that's what we will have different for next week, week number 6. But other than that, we'll have our regular class at 7 p.m. next week. And if you cannot make it, that's okay. You can always watch the recorded video later on YouTube. That's why if you cannot make it, that's why I'm having the quiz also available for a whole day on Saturday as well. All right. So that's what I'm going to do for next week. And the quiz is going to be, again, tonight's quiz, this evening's quiz is also very easy. You'll see when you read the questions. And this one is also going to be an easy quiz. All right. So again, my main purpose is just to show you different people, how they do evaluation of user interfaces, how they build prototypes by using different techniques. So the main purpose of these articles is to give you some in-depth discussion, in-depth view of this user interaction topics. All right, so let's, if you don't have any questions about these announcements, let's start this evening's lecture, Evaluating Usability. Predictive evaluation and interpretive evaluation. This is something interesting, predictive evaluation, which means that we can actually employ models of users, not the actual users, but sometimes models of users can help us to evaluate an interface. And we can predict the user actions if we have a good model. That's what predictive evaluation is. This is difficult to have accurate models of users. So if you have actually access to real users, you should always choose interpretive evaluation, which is involving real users. But if accessing real users is not possible and you somehow have some usability experts or some accurate model of the users, then you can use predictive evaluation. So we are going to see the details about these things on the slides. All right, so these slides are modified from Eileen Kramer's Human-Computer Interaction teaching material at the Department of Computer Science at the University of Georgia. And here, let me enable scrolling. We are going to first place what evaluation in the context of interaction design, why evaluation is important. Actually, everything is tied together. We have talked about prototyping. We have talked about how to involve users in the design process. And their evaluation also has a critical role in that interaction design process. It's actually, there's a STAR life cycle in which evaluation is at the center. We evaluate prototype, We evaluate different usability goals. So evaluation is really important, and the main purpose of this usability evaluation is to get user feedback and correct certain usability flaws if we have any. And there are different, for example, usability evaluation labs around the world in which, in a controlled environment, you can capture usage data. For example, when you're evaluating a system, how do you know for what do you measure? For example, there are things like gaze eye trackers that are mounted on displays. By using these eye trackers, you can actually the data you have is where is the user, where are the users looking at on the screen? Are they focusing on certain parts? So you can get like heat maps on where the users are focusing on the screen with the help of these eye trackers. You can also do mouse keyboard logging. You can collect some log data. You can video record the entire session, videotape the entire session, and you may have video data, audio data. All these different modes of data, different parts, can be synchronously analyzed. So we can observe, so we can get some quantitative data by these log. We can use logs, or we can, for example, again in these logs we can find whether there are errors the user is making, and things like that. And there's another data which is mostly qualitative, is users' opinions. After an evaluation session, asking the user certain questions about the usability of the interface is also important. So most of the time, when the user is using the system, the user's opinions, whether the user is frustrated or not, may not be directly visible from these observations. So getting inside the user's head and getting users' opinions is therefore important. And how to get those, we are going to see how to conduct questionnaires at the end of these evaluation sessions. We are going to talk about these things. And interpretive evaluation is the evaluation technique that involves real users. So most evaluation protocols, they involve real users. And predictive evaluation is also possible, we are going to see, when you have access to a usability expert. Sometimes there are people who are expert in these evaluation of these systems. They are usability experts, and they can actually, they're also good at simulating novice users. Just like testers, these usability experts are expert on modeling users' behavior. And they also have a set of checklists, guidelines, that they walk through the interface, and they see whether these usability goals are met by using the interface themselves. So if you use that usability expert to evaluate your user interface, that's also called predictive evaluation. And sometimes we, as I say, employ models of users. We can predict, for example, how long it's going to take, how much time, how many minutes this certain task is going to take, by modeling, for example, the mouse movement, how much time it takes to move the mouse pointer from one place to another place. When the target is large, or the distance is small. So let me change the mouse pointer size so you can see my pointer better. So we're going to talk about these. And evaluation is really at the center in human-computer interaction design model. In order to involve users in our design activities, one way to do that is to have the users use the interface. And the way we do that by in evaluation sessions. Therefore, and the design there should integrate knowledge and expertise from different disciplines. The actual users' opinions, their experiences should also get into the final design decisions. And we have seen how we can build by iteratively developing a prototype. We can build the final product, or the prototypes can evolve into the final product. But all these things there, the design is really highly iterative, meaning that we see We evaluate some prototype, we see certain things good with that, certain things bad with that, we look at alternatives, we merge these different design decisions, we move on to the next prototype. And this design process is highly iterative. We iterate and iterate, we make it better, we make it better. It's just like for example, writing a manuscript. You first have a first draft, and then you can make it better. But if you read it 1 week later, you see errors in it. You see that certain parts are not laid out nicely. So iteratively, you make it better and better. And here in user interface design, we apply the same thing. Iteratively, we make the prototypes better, and each time, how do we make it better? We need to learn certain lessons, and we do it by evaluating these prototypes. And during these evaluations, it's the users are involved, therefore. So this is the STAR lifecycle. You may have seen in different software engineering workflows, there's the waterfall model, different models, and this life cycle. So software development life cycle, there are different life cycles. And this, for user interaction design, this is a very popular, widely applied life cycle for user interaction design. And it's called the STAR life cycle. It's called STAR because there is a pivot, there is something at the center, there is one activity which is really critical, and it's put into the center, and it's evaluation. You implement something, you evaluate your implementation. Function analysis, task analysis, whether you have covered all the tasks in this application. You evaluate those by putting those set of tasks into test, by having the users use those tasks, for example, towards some goal in some scenario. Prototyping is also an important activity, and we evaluate prototypes. We evaluate requirement specification. Your conceptual design, formal design can also be evaluated. So all these different parts are evaluated, and iteratively better designs are formed. So evaluation is really a critical component of user interaction design. So we do evaluation. I mean, in general, software engineering development and software development life cycle, we test the functionality of a system. So there are testing techniques like unit tests or different types of tests, black box testing. I'm not giving a software testing course, but you know better. You probably know better than me in industry. Different techniques are available to test the functionality of a system. But most of the time, the usability of the system is overlooked. I mean, we don't test the user interface thoroughly as we test the functionality of a system, because most of the time the requirement specifications list functions of a system, and usability is in the background. And so this sometimes people think that this is not so critical. Function is more critical. They give more priority to this, and usability therefore is just stays in the background. No time is spent on testing usability, but it's really important. Sometimes really a better user interface with the same functions is why people choose some system, some application over another. Okay, so this is at the end, this will be the interface the users are going to have with the system. So no matter how good your functionality is, if it's not usable, then I mean, all these functionalities are wasted. And usability evaluation, sometimes it may occur in a laboratory, it may occur in the field. So your next week's reading is going to compare these two things. For example, when we test multi-purpose large display in the laboratory, what can we measure and what can we not measure, and when it's tested in the field, what new things that we can discover. Okay, so this is the feedback we get when we test it in the field may be different. It can be in collaboration with users, and it may evaluate both the design, usable implementation, the functionality. And this is important. It should be considered. Usually, another thing that is done wrong in software development with some interfaces that usually the evaluation is done. I mean, we have the alpha beta test. It comes all the way. I mean, if you think about the alpha beta test, it's done after the product is finished. Okay, it's just like after we have the first draft of the product with all the functionalities there. All right, but if you're going to design user interfaces and the user interface evaluation is important for us, we cannot just wait at the end and do the evaluation all the way at the end. This is really important. Evaluation should be considered at all stages in the design life cycle. And when we evaluate, so this article, which is optional, so we're not going to have a quiz about this optional reading on usability evaluation. This is also a very nice article. I suggest you read this too. Oh yeah, the main point that I was going to show was from this article actually. I wanted to show the main finding of this evaluation. I now remember that here at the discussion or at the conclusion, I think. Let me draw. Yeah, here, this is their main message in this article is whatever evaluation methodology they are using, if any, it must arise from and be appropriate for the actual problem or research question under consideration. It means that when you're going to decide what you're going to evaluation, although it's at the center, the techniques that are available for evaluation shouldn't be our main focus. For example, just because we have an eye tracker, we should not design our evaluation saying that, okay, we have to use that eye tracker. And we have to ask questions about eye tracker. We collected the data. What can we use the eye tracker for? What kind of evaluation we can do with that? It shouldn't be like that. I mean, this main message basically tells us that the technology shouldn't be the driving force. Your evaluation methodologies should not be fixed beforehand. It must arise whatever you're going to evaluate. It's going to be, for example, to evaluate the robustness of a system, to evaluate the ease of use of a system, ease of learnability of a system. First, you need to define your usability goals and then think about how you can measure them, whether those goals are met or not, or how good they are met. For example, how can you measure whether a system is easy to use without any training? So you have to design tests for those. You have to think about scenarios in which users are going to come with no training and start using the system. But start using the system again is not so vague. You should design scenarios specific to that application and give those scenarios as tasks to the user and see how fast they do that. And you should have some certain time goal in mind for that system to be usable without any training, or whether that task is successfully completed or not. Two things here. Yeah, the task may be successfully completed with no training, and the task can be completed quickly with the user not trying to read lots of things, or going through the correct path of actions when performing that task. So, but it should come from the research question under consideration, or what is the usability problem, what is the usability goal here. Then usability techniques should be decided after that. All right. So this paper deals with. I think it also gives examples of how evaluation is useful when used appropriately. But this is also nice, interesting title: usability evaluation as weak science. So as we collect data, sometimes we collect qualitative data, which is like for example, just opinions. If you cannot just have a questionnaire and ask the user that, did you like our interface? Were you happy using the interface? Things like that are really vague questions. So, and what are you going to do with those answers is another thing. So this one also is showing another life cycle in which evaluation is one of the activities. The human-computer interaction process starts with evaluation, design, and implementation. So this one is also in a cycle. It shows that it's an iterative process. Okay, so this is a nice opinion paper. If you have time, I suggest you read this too, but it's optional. Is that our quiz for next week is not going to be about this paper. It's going to be about this multi-purpose large displays, which is interactive public displays in the wild. Okay, all right, so let's continue with this. So we can, depending on the application, as I said, we can gather data about the usability of a product design by a specific group of users. So for a particular activity, so this is how you design your evaluation scenario, test bed. Well, who are the users? What are you evaluating? What is the activity that you're evaluating? Is this going to be in a specified environment, or are you going to evaluate this product in this context where it's going to be used in the factory, in the office? Sometimes the spectrum that you get from evaluation could vary remarkably from informal feedbacks like, oh, I like the interface. That's a very informal feedback, to control lab experiments in which you collect numerical data. Even there are things that you can use, like the galvanic skin response of a person shows, for example, whether they are stressed or not. So you can use some biometric measurements like heart rate. This galvanic skin response is used a lot, or maybe with some fMRI data, you can also collect data about the about what the user is doing in this control lab experiment. So there are usability labs around the world that help researchers evaluate their interfaces in a controlled lab environment. And in ODTU, we also have such a user interface, usability lab. I think it was in the computer center. If you're interested, in the second floor of the computer center, there is a room. Such control labs, they look like studios, music studios, in which there's a room where the user sits, and there's another room, controlled room, where all the sound control, video recording control things are situated. And then you can have some pre-evaluation session with the user to describe what is going to go on, and you can also have post-evaluation sessions with the user to gather this additional data about the interface. And yeah, sometimes we I think you can see it and use that laboratory, the usability laboratory, by getting some appointment. Actually, let's take a look at whether the computer center there should be some protocol to usability lab. Usage regulation, no. Oh, they have, in computer center, they have human-computer interaction, research and application laboratory. So usage regulation. So how you use that? Oh yeah, this is HCI lab. Yeah, it's in the computer center, first floor. It also gives the location. And wow, they have an eye tracker and track eye movement during the study. Yeah, and how you use that? Oh, I think it's serves the foundation university, so I think it may be free. So there's a related application form for the laboratory usage, and so you can contact them to see how you can use it. And if you want to see that laboratory, it's a small room. I once visited that as, I think, my elder kid was in one of the he was a volunteer in one of the study on children. So we went there as a user to take part in some evaluation procedure. Yeah, they have an email address. if you want to take a look at that, I think you'll be able to see. I don't know the COVID situation because this website may be outdated. I mean, may not have the correct information about our COVID situation these days. But yeah, we have a laboratory and computer center. Yeah, studies. Well, they have this. They have a really nice. So these are some publications, posters that are published by using the laboratory and computer center. A lot of studies, as you can see. And Kürşat Hoca from CEIT department. Also, these are all, I think, the computer education and information technologies department. Yeah, and Informatics Institute. These professors are from Informatics Institute, so they use it regularly. Some of them are former professors in Informatics Institute. All right, so that's good to know. So we have such a lab too in ODTÜ. And when we are evaluating the system, we can evaluate the functionality as well. Effect of the interface on user, whether it causes frustration or some emotional things can be measured, assessed by video recording, and we can identify specific problems. I'm going to give you some examples that real companies did when evaluating their system. So there was an example about Travelodge, I think. They had a booking system or a reception software, the software they use in their hotel's reception. So it's a big chain, and they evaluated. They made a change in their reception software in the lobby that they use in the lobby, and they evaluated it in IBM's usability laboratory in London, for example, and they identified, like in that specific test case, evaluations that they performed for 2 weeks, they identified like more than 80 different problems with the interface. So we're going to give a look at those examples. And sometimes, why do we do evaluations? To understand the real world, the users. When we do this evaluation in the context, in the workplace, we can see, oh, how is this device going to be used in the work environment? Is it going to be a crowded environment? For example, imagine you're building a user interface about speech recognition, and you develop everything in your lab, in your office nicely, and then when you apply that application on a tablet, which is going to be used in a factory, you see that there is lots of noise in the background, and that speech application that you developed is completely useless when it's used in a factory environment when there is lots of background noise. So doing evaluation in this context helps you see these problems. So how can you make it fit better with the work environment? So you see, after you see these things, you can change your design to tailor for that working environment. You also do evaluations to compare alternative designs. The good thing about prototyping is it allows you cheaply develop alternative design decisions into several different products, and you can compare these alternative designs. It may be competitors or among different design options within your actual design team. You also do evaluate that. Sometimes you may have specific target usability goals. For example, like this 80% of novice users should be able to perform this task on first try. So, for example, you may design an interface. You may be a printing company and you're developing the new touchscreen based interface for your printing machines. A novice user means that a person who comes and tries to use this copier the first time, and those are really, they have lots of functions, and whether they will be able to print it correctly on the first try, that may be your design goal, and you may change the interface towards meeting that design goal. 80% of novice users should do that, so you may have like specific threshold these targets. And sometimes You also do evaluation to check whether the your interface is conforming to a certain standard. This is especially important, for example, when you're designing for Android mobile applications for Android or iOS. They have certain design guidelines, and you may check whether those design guidelines are met. They or there is also some ISO standards for user interfaces. You may also uh, evaluate your interface to check whether it conforms those standards. We do evaluation at different times in the design workflow. We do evaluation early to predict the usability of product or a certain aspect of a product. And when we evaluate, this is also a good way to check the design team's understanding of user usability requirements and test out ideas quickly and informally. And when we do evaluation later, we can do it to identify user difficulties, fine tune the interface, improve certain aspects of the interface as well when it's performed later in the stage. So here are some examples of usability uh, evaluation. One case study was in 1984 Olympic messaging system before anybody has mobile phones. So there was no mobility. We had landline phones or pay phones in 1984. Mobile phones were not that common. And imagine lots of athletes from all over the world coming to the Olympic Village with their families. So they have different training schedule. Their families are going sightseeing. So communication within family members and different coming for athletes coming from all the world is really a challenge. So they tried to design kiosks, just like ATMs, placed around the Olympic Village that can be as a voicemail. So you can, which means that you can record messages for certain people and they can come and use it in the kiosk to get messages that are that are targeted, that are sent to them. So these 10,000 athletes, they were the main target. And for example, in this case, some athletes may not even speak English. So providing a multilingual application is really important, providing something like that. So that's like a requirements, functionality requirement. And they also did their design by applying a user-centered design. They first prepared lots of scenarios of the user interface. This is like low fidelity prototypes. They obtained comments from designers, and then some after a certain they talked about certain prospective users, certain functions that they thought were useful, they altered, they changed them. Sometimes some functionalities may be dropped after talking with the user. So in the early stage, they just went over these low fidelity prototypes with the users and went over those actual scenarios to see whether those functions will be needed or not. And then again, this is like a medium fidelity prototype. They produced brief user guides and they tested their Olympians. So who are the stakeholders here? Not just only the athletes, they are families, friends, and they performed. So I told you that design is an iterative process. There were more than 200 iterations before the final form of the interface was decided. They conducted early simulations, again tested with the users. So in all of these stages, in every one of those bullets, they involved real users. And they, for example, at one stage at simulation, they found out that they need an undo functionality. They also toured different Olympic Village sites. They did early demonstration. They interviewed with people, and lots of iteration and testing was involved. And they also there's when we're doing the evaluation, there are different ways to evaluate it. One way is the hallway method. You put the kiosk in some place and let the people use it, and you just uh, monitor you observe their reactions, you observe their interaction with the system. And you might also collect opinions in terms of questionnaires, surveys. And after that, you can actually decide on the physical appearance of the kiosk. There's also this try to destroy it method. So how robust is that? If you want to test its robustness, some CS students, which are probably good at testing different edge cases, were invited to test the robustness by trying to crash the kiosk software. And here, the main principles that we need to gather from this user-centered design is that focusing on users and tasks as early as possible in the design process is really important. We cannot wait all the way to the end before we show the final product to the Olympians and saying that, okay, look at this, we built something very useful for you, and this is how you're going to use it. If you do it like that, you'll probably need to train all those 10,000 athletes for 1 month or so to show them how to use the system. We have these such kind of software these days a lot. I mean, when we are faced with a question. Okay, I heard the sound and I thought somebody wanted to ask a question. That's okay. So yeah, these days when we, for example, change a certain system with some software, like the first time ODTÜ came to ODTÜ, there were lots of training sessions for faculty members to show them how to use it. So what happened was the faculty members, I don't think faculty members from different departments, they were not involved in the design process. They probably, since it's based on Moodle, they just decided on what functional. There was probably a development team or some consultation team, which included faculty members, but I don't think usability tests were performed before the final system was put into use. Therefore, they had to provide lots of tutorials, lots of documentation to accompany the system. But the correct way to do is to have users and tasks involved as early as possible in the design process. And then you can also measuring reactions using the prototype manuals, interfaces, simulations. Designing iteratively is also a very important thing here. And all these usability factors and the design, they evolve together. Yeah, this was the other study that I was going to mention, Forte Travelodge. Here, this was a central room booking system software again, and their main goal was to make it more efficient. Because if they make it more efficient, if this is the booking system they use at their reception, more efficient means faster booking. If there's a line of customers that are waiting, they're going to leave as happy customers if the central room booking system is as efficient as possible. So that was their system goal. They wanted faster central room booking. And they used IBM's Usability Evaluation Center in London. So IBM had this, I don't know whether they still have it or not. And before going live with the system, their goal was to identify and eliminate usability problems before actually putting it to use in every one of their hotels in different parts in the world. And also avoid business difficulties, ensure system is easy to use even by inexperienced staff. So that's one usability. So they look at these. The evaluation goals are set beforehand. What is the what are your main critical points? If there's an inexperienced staff, for example, they should be able to use the system with no extensive training. And at the end of this evaluation process, they will develop improved training material and documentation based on the feedback they get from the evaluation. So this is a usability lab. So this is how it looks. As you can see, this is very similar to a studio where this is, if it was a music studio and sound studio, their musicians would be here, and this is where the monitors will be, the sound engineer. So similar to that, there are control devices, recording, different computers that show what is recorded. So this is really like a control room, and there are computers also here. Probably the software that is to be evaluated here are put to use here, and the users come here. And usually there's a one-way mirror, because there is also, if the users should really feel comfortable. If you're watching the user very closely when they're using the system, there is this similar to that Heisenberg principle. When you're observing it, you change its behavior. Just the same thing actually happens psychologically to users. They will feel more stressed. They will not perform as if they are in their. Uh, they will not be relaxed and as if they're in their working environment. So you should just let the users feel as comfortable as possible. That's why we have this one-way mirror actually. Microphone, audio, video recording. And here in this Travelodge system, there's also some particular aspects of interest. How easy is the system navigation? How the speed of use is important, going from one task to another, for example. Screen design, effectiveness of on-screen help and error messages. For example, if something goes wrong during the booking, can the staff understand what went wrong and correct it quickly? Complexity of keyboards for computer novices. So if these are not people who use computer regularly, and when they are employed at this service desk, can they still use it efficiently? And whether the training program is effective or not. So probably they, before starting the evaluation session, the staff goes through a training program. So they're also measuring the effectiveness of their training program with these tests, and clarity and ease of use of documentation. So what they did was they developed a set of 15 common scenarios. This is really important when you're using usability tests. So they actually designed how they're going to do the evaluation. They developed 15 different scenarios about room booking. I mean, I cannot think of 15 scenarios. Maybe a room booking with a family member, a family booking multiple rooms, uh, a single person without any reservations. They may have reservations. So, but if I cannot think of 15 scenarios, and they said 15 common scenarios, so it means that they elaborated on this a lot. And they enacted this by cross section of staff. So some of the staff uh, were like customers in the hotel, and they had 8 half day sessions, several scenarios per session. So it was a long 8 day long evaluation. And they also emphasized the evaluation is not of the staff. So it's not like they're going to be evaluated and they're going to get scores here, and if they cannot score well, they're going to get fired. It's not like that. So they made sure that the staff knows that they're not evaluated here. It's the user interface that is being evaluated. And there were some video cameras operated by remote control in the control room. And after each session, after each of these half-day sessions, there were some debriefing sessions after the testing periods to get information about the problems. And this is interesting, the feelings about the system. So there's some qualitative feedback we get from the users as well, and they documented these. And they, at the end of these evaluation, they received useful training, and they identified 62 usability failures. If they didn't spend this 8-day evaluation, they would then find these usability failures when the system is going after it's live, and maybe many of them will not be reported. Some of them the staff is going to think it's their wrongdoing. So it was really good to identify these usability failures and correct them before going live. And here, they after the test, they give priorities to different things. For example, uncomfortable furniture. This was not in the initial initial set of goals. They needed to redesign telephone headsets. I think the central book room it's not in the reception, but I think it's like a phone-based booking central room booking system. Since I think they're just remotely operated. It's like a call center for hotel booking. And the new system was at the end, it's a high productive, low turnover, faster booking, and greater customer satisfaction. And when there are different evaluation methods, I mentioned some of those. This is a repetition actually. When we are observing or monitoring, we can take logs, and sometimes the evaluator, the observer, may take
Right.
notes or video. We can take the keystroke log or mouse event log. It can We can take the logs of those things. But when we're uh, analyzing them, it's very important to synchronize the events with the video. For example, when you have the video recording and when you have the keyboard logs, mouse logs, they have to be. You have to have nice like a GarageBand type an editor which shows all these different channels of data, different tracks. You'll have video, eye tracking, track, uh, keyboard, press track, mouse track. All these tracks you have to uh, analyze them simultaneously. They have to be nicely synchronized. Okay. And these are things that you can do with some numerical type of data. And you can also collect user opinions with surveys and interviews. And since when we are doing these experiments, so this is the saying that usability evaluation is weak science. So this is also saying the same thing. It's like semi-scientific approach because there's psychology involved here. We cannot control all variables. It's not a fully controlled experiment evaluation that we're doing here. And the size of the sample is usually not that large because each of these evaluation scenarios, 8 half-day sessions, it probably takes some money and time, and therefore the size of the sample is also not as large as that we want. All right, so these are the issues that we consider. All right, so actually we can have a break here and I can update the quiz to be available at 7:55. So let's have a break now. I will continue from here after the break and finish probably in 1 hour the remaining slides. All right, so let's take a 15-minute break until 10 past 8. And I'm going to edit the quiz now and make it available at 7:55, so you can take the quiz, and it will be available for 15 minutes. All right, so I'm going to stop recording now.